Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 892 for August 25th, 2021. The leaders of the Bourbon Women, founder Peggy No Stevens, Chair Heather Wibbels, and President Maggie Kimberl, joined me last Friday night on our Happy Hour Live webcast. Bourbon Women is celebrating its 10th anniversary this week with the return of its annual Symposium Conference in Louisville, Kentucky, after last year's event was canceled because of the pandemic. Thanks as always to our presenting sponsors of Whiskey Cast, Redbreast and Dewar's, for making our weekly live shows possible, along with our segment sponsors on the podcast each week, Sagamore Spirit, Writer's Tears, and Oban. This is going to be a fun webcast. I guarantee you we're going to have a lot of laughs, and I'm fully expecting that at some point I'm going to lose control of this show. That's because we have the leadership of the Bourbon Women with us. Top right, Peggy No Stevens, the founder and chair emeritus of Bourbon Women. Down lower left, Maggie Kimberl, the president of Bourbon Women. And Heather Wibbels, the current board chair of Bourbon Women. They're celebrating their 10th anniversary this year. And the Bourbon Women Symposium, not a symposium, it's a symposium, is next weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. Ladies, how you all doing?
Doing great.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
This has been, in the last 24 hours, we've gotten more reaction to the three of you coming on this show than we've had in a lot of weeks. This is one of the tweets that came out as soon as we announced this yesterday from Kylie Flett in Philadelphia. I can't even read this because there's a word here that I cannot use and get away with. I've already been told, don't you even think about reading that word out loud. But that's badass I can talk about. And there's no argument there with the three of you. I mean,
these three, I love Kylie.
I'm going to be honest with you. Between the three of them, and probably each individually, they've forgotten more about bourbon and whiskey in general than I know. I mean, Peggy's in the Bourbon Hall of Fame. Maggie is also part of American Whiskey Magazine and Whiskey Magazine, and Heather is a cocktail Contessa and guru. So if there's a question you have about whiskey, one of these three is going to know the answer to it. And you can submit your comments online in the chat functions on our YouTube channel and the Facebook page. If you're watching us on Twitter or Twitch, we won't see those till after the show's over. And we are getting all kinds of comments already about this. And let's see what we have here. Nurse Dave, I need a sponsorship for my drinking like Mark has. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Hey, if it weren't for the sponsors, we wouldn't have this. Also from
That's
Dave,
right.
Don't come in here without taking off your shoes, clicking the like button. We're hearing from else Tabitha in England. Evening, everyone. Let's see here. Dave Kuhn, been at the Newport Folk Festival in Rhode Island, back in Providence for a bachelor party, managed not to get COVID. I hope you were wearing your masks, Dave, all the week, all throughout. Let's talk about the symposium next week. What are you all doing to make sure that this only spreads the bourbon love and not COVID?
Exactly. You know, it's interesting because all around the world, this thing has moved so quickly again, right? So even the best plans, thinking we were free and clear, it's like COVID's hovering right here. So we decided, to follow, of course, the guidelines of our state, of our hotel, of our distilleries, and respect that. And we went so far as to say whether it's mandated, which it is not mandated in Kentucky to wear a mask, we said mask up, flask up. And so everyone will have a mask, and we have social distancing at the hotel. So we're in a ballroom, I think, that seats 800 people. We're only at 200, so that's how much we're spreading out. Even on buses, we'll be masking, and we've got hand sanitizing stations. If we could do it, we did it. And so we want to respect, the distilleries and the culture and frankly, being a master taster, protect my palate.
Amen. Heather, what are you going to be doing during all this? I know you're the cocktail expert. What are you going to be doing next week?
Well, I am going to be helping announce some of the events that we're doing. I am actually leading a presentation called Ice Hacks for Bourbon Lovers and Whiskey Geeks. And we are going to talk all about ice and cocktails. And I'm going to teach a little bit about the history of ice and the science of ice. We're going to geek out about that stuff because that's what I love. And then I'm making some specialty cocktails for some of the smaller events like the Presidents and Chairs tasting that Maggie and I are going to do, which is Thursday. So we're going to have a specialty cocktail with some special infusions for that. So, and I'll just be around everywhere helping everybody have fun because I feel like I'm the original Bourbon Women super fan. I joined and I'm like, I am all in. I'm here for the fun and we are ready to go.
The history of ice.
Yes.
Got cold, water froze, and we figured out it works in some drinks.
This is why you're not a member, Mark.
Exactly. That and a friggin' Y chromosome.
Hey,
no, you can join. You just have to be prepared.
Absolutely. You're going to be outnumbered, but you can absolutely join us.
Oh, bloody hell. I've been outnumbered for years around here.
That's right. You have a house full of girls, don't you?
I have 3 grown daughters, yeah.
Yeah.
And, next month is 35 years of marriage, and
So you've been quite outnumbered for a long time.
Yeah. Let's not even go there.
At this point, it's a conspiracy, Mark.
Oh, no, there's no conspiracy here. I know that this exists. This is not a conspiracy theory. We know about this one. So what are you drinking tonight? Maggie, let's start with you. What have you got in your glass?
Well, I've got my Texas Whiskey Trail Glencairn glass, and I am drinking some of the 2021 FAE01 Maker's Mark because we are actually with the symposium supporting the Lee Initiative, which Maker's Mark has been a huge contributor to. So just grabbed that bottle right off the shelf tonight.
Heather?
I, of course, have a cocktail. Part of being the cocktail Contessa is making lots of cocktails and testing them. So I have tiny vials of cocktails, leftover cocktails all over my fridge. So I picked, it's a blackberry peach old fashioned. Actually, it's got some blackberry simple syrup, some peach simple syrup, and some black walnut bitters. I think the base spirit I used was Old Forester 100. It's kind of my testing bourbon for cocktails. So that's what I'm sipping on.
Peggy?
Well, Mark, you're special when I'm with you on a Friday at 5:00, right? So are you wanting me to tell you my first glass of bourbon or my second one that I've had?
The one you're working through now, and then you can tell us what you started with.
Oh, okay. Well, the one that I'm working on is our 10-year anniversary bottle. Can you see?
I can see the side of it. Oh, yeah, from Huber's.
Yeah, that's Huber's Starlight Distillery in Indiana. And we did a special barrel pick. Heather was part of that. Maggie was part of that. And I thought it was very appropriate that I pour a glass of that.
I can't wait to get a bottle of that. I'm so excited.
What was your first one, though, Peggy?
I can't either.
And it's 108 proof, by the way.
Nice. What was your...
Yeah, so be on the lookout for that. My first one was Elijah Craig.
Barrel proof or regular?
Barrel proof.
Of course. And I picked an appropriate one, the Widow Jane 15 Years The Vaults, from our buddy Lisa Wicker, who I know is going to be out there with you next weekend.
I've got that right up on my top shelf. It's a great bottle.
Yeah. And I'm happy to say I'm doing a very private dinner outside my home, out on my back patio, and only about 20 or so women are coming. And Lisa is my VIP guest, and I've paired a 3-course meal with all Widow Jane products. And we're making all of the cocktails with Widow Jane and appetizer pairings, and it's going to be incredible. And I've known Lisa personally and professionally for quite some time now. And so this is just going to be sheer fun.
Oh, that's going to be wild. I hope somebody brings bail money.
Yeah.
Do they take debit cards?
I got you. I'll be back at the hotel.
Okay, good.
That's what Maggie does for me. That's what Maggie does.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I'm the operations guru during this rodeo next weekend. So I'll be back at the hotel bailing people out.
We have a question for you about cocktails, Heather, from Crump the Cask Hole. As he's said many times, a bourbon and ginger with a lime wedge and a drop of bitters is his cocktail of choice. Is there an actual name for this drink? Yeah, bourbon and ginger.
Well, if it's bourbon and ginger beer, that would be a Kentucky Mule. If it's just bourbon and ginger, I don't know that there's a specific class of cocktail for that. But if it is bourbon and
the highball?
Well, if it's ginger ale, that would be a highball. If you have the lime wedge and ginger beer and bourbon, that's more of a Kentucky Mule, served in one of those beautiful copper mugs with, a mint sprig and a lime wedge on top. But bourbon and ginger are a fantastic combination.
I always call that one a dark and stormy.
That's trademarked, I thought.
Is it?
Yeah, that was the Gosling's.
Yeah, it has to be rum.
Yeah, that has to be Gosling's rum.
Yeah, it has to be Gosling's dark rum.
That gets you a lawsuit.
Okay, well, I take it back.
Be careful.
Yeah, we take it back.
We have to bail you out, Maggie.
Dave's going to Bourbon Mule. Yeah, Bourbon Mule, just like
there you go.
Moscow Mule.
Kentucky Mule.
What's the difference between that and the Moscow Mule?
So a Kentucky Mule has bourbon in it, and a Moscow Mule has vodka in it. That's it.
I do not pay much attention to cocktails, especially those with vodka, so.
Now you know.
Well, I am kind of known for taking every cocktail that has vodka or any other spirit in it and putting bourbon in it just to see what'll happen.
Why wouldn't you?
Exactly. I mean, one of my theories is that everybody can be a bourbon drinker. You just got to get them to it in the right cocktail. So. Somebody
tried to get me to try a margarita with bourbon. They sent me a recipe for it. I'm going, no.
I would totally drink that all day long. Are you kidding me? That sounds amazing.
It's excellent.
I mean,
we are equal. Hey, Mark, we're equal opportunity drinkers.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So we would definitely drink a margarita. I would drink a Bloody Mary if I had to with bourbon in it.
Oh, yeah. Those are really popular. But yeah, I love whiskey sours, and I don't. That's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from a margarita.
Oh yeah, it just has a little bit of extra orange in it. It has a little bit of orange in it.
And the egg whites, right?
It has lime juice instead of lemon.
Right.
Well, yeah. And whiskey sours don't have to be made with egg whites.
I like them with egg whites, though. They're really yummy with egg whites.
They are good.
I'm a little
silky.
Well, I can't have it with egg whites, so I just stay away from them completely because I don't know whether unless the bartender is making them.
Have you ever tried Aquafaba?
No.
It'll change your world.
Take it away, Heather.
It'll change your world.
Enlighten him about Aquafaba.
Okay, so Aquafaba is when you get a can of garbanzo beans, right, chickpeas, the water that you drain off is called Aquafaba. I'm not exactly sure how it got that name, but that is what it's called. And it can do the same thing that an egg white does in a cocktail. So it adds mouthfeel, makes it silky, and gives it that gorgeous head of foam on the top. So you just substitute Aquafaba for egg white, and you have a vegan whiskey sour with no egg white.
That is interesting because we got a boatload of chickpeas in the pantry because the boss is vegan and I'm now been forced to go vegan against my will or vegetarian against my will since the last kid moved out of the house. So we may have Aquafaba in the house and I didn't even know it.
So,
well, there you go.
I think you're going to be trying
you can use that.
That's worth the whole podcast. You learning.
Yeah, right there. Right there.
What, me admitting to this or what?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to start the Vegan Against My Will podcast with me just doing nothing but griping about vegan recipes. But I have to admit,
we should totally do that. I'll go on there with you. I'm a shitty part-time vegan, so I could totally go on there and we can, express our feelings about veganism together.
Actually, I have to admit, and I'm going to have to turn in my barbecue club card for this, but I can't eat. I find it now eating that plant-based meat stuff, these Impossible burgers and stuff. I actually like them more than I do ground beef. Hamburgers.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yep. And I'm not big on the artificial, fake meat and, food substitute things, but the Impossible burgers are actually really good. And if you need something that's vegan-ish when you're on the go, you can get an Impossible burger a lot of places. And it's really nice when you're traveling.
I used to joke that if you go to Burger King and you tip the kid behind the counter $5, he'll take a real Whopper and wrap it up inside an Impossible Whopper wrapper so that you can pretend. But
it sounds like you may have done that before.
I threatened to. Nurse Dave's Shaving World. I feel like I don't even know Mark anymore. Dear God. Here we go.
We're sorry we got you in this trouble, Mark.
And Tabitha, how can you tell if someone's vegan? Don't worry. They'll let you know.
They will let you know.
Yep.
You know, even honestly, with all of this, the food allergies and gluten and everything, even with Symposium, we ask everybody, are you on a special diet? Do we need to know food allergies? I think there were 30 names of us to keep up with on special diets and accommodating. But one thing, other than vegan, the fried chicken that we're going to have at Huber's, it's like no one's allergic to fried chicken. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Unless they're allergic to peanut oil.
Right. Well,
and as Crump pointed out, one does not have to succumb to all of the wife's wishes. One does if one can't cook worth a damn.
You make an excellent point, Mark.
Yeah. And but your life will be easier if you do. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Hey, let's get back to whiskey now. Peggy, 10 years of Bourbon Women. How did you found the group in the first place? And what was it like in those early years?
Gosh, I have to say the thought of this went well into when I worked at Brown-Forman. I mean, and when I worked in corporate life and worked on Woodford Reserve and Jack Daniel and, you know, those types of brands. And I worked in the marketing department and always said, hey, you know, I knew I loved bourbon drinker, whiskey drinker. Women were attracted to it. And I just knew that there was a huge market. I mean, women are the other half of the population, no doubt about it. And so every time I would bring it up, you know, the priority of marketing dollars, which I get, you know, had to go to other target markets. And so I could never get my foot in the door on marketing to women and whiskey. So when I started my own company in 2008, I thought to myself, I think I'll just start my own damn thing. And I brought a really dynamic group of women together. There's probably about 8 of us, and we had some Manhattans and we chatted. And, you know, I said, listen, I really think we should cater to the women of Kentucky, especially, and bring these women together. Let's do some focus groups. Let's get this together. So we did that, and overwhelming. I think we had about 60 women that we put through the focus group. Overwhelming. They said, hey, if you did an organization like this, we would come to the events. We would love to learn. We would, you know, we want to share our lifestyle with them. And so it went. I put together a strategy, and this is kind of a fun story, but I called Bill Samuels after I wrote that strategy for Bourbon Women. And because Bill was always a mentor for me. He was the one that introduced me on the Hall of Fame night, you know, which meant a lot to me. And I sat with him and I said, Bill, I need you to read this and I want your honest reaction. How's the industry going to embrace this? What am I up against? Is this going to work? And he was so overwhelmingly positive. And he said, you know, Peggy, he said the magic words. He said, it's time we start a conversation with women. And he used the word conversation. He didn't say market to them. He said, we got to start a conversation. And that gave me the confidence more than anything to really begin. And so in 2011, we had our launch at the Governor's Mansion in Kentucky. And when other women from other cities found out about our Kentucky, national branch or whatever, then it was like, we want to branch in Indiana. We want to branch in Ohio. And it was like a freight train, literally. So I couldn't be more proud to stand here or sit here in front of you all and tell you in a million years, we now have thousands of women we talk to. In a million years, I never thought it would grow this big.
How much of that guidance from Bill do you think was inspired by his mom, who was really a lot of the driving force behind Maker's Mark, because it was Margie Samuels who was kicking Bill Sr.'s butt the whole way?
Well, you're right. And, just to date this a little bit, he never brought his mother's name up, of course. And the story really wasn't out in 2011. And I'll tell you why. Because the book Whiskey Women had not been written yet by Fred Minnick. And the reason why is because Fred Minnick came to this is kind of a funny story. Fred Minnick came to the inauguration at the Governor's Mansion, and I was standing up talking about how women really have been part of the industry. We just haven't gotten credit for it. They worked in the fields, they worked in the offices, the bottling lines, et cetera. And Fred, being the journalist he is, thought I was full of it. And he was going to fact check me. And he told me that. And so I said, well, you go right ahead. And so the more he fact checked, the Marge Samuels came up, all these stories of women, and he wrote the book, Whiskey Women. And that to me is so funny. And now we're great friends. And he still hasn't given me a commission check for helping him write that book.
Oh, yeah, that's going to happen.
But you've let him know he owes you, right?
What's that?
You've let him know that he owes you, right?
Oh, I've let him know many times. Many times.
Heather, how did you get involved? Since you said you were one of the original Bourbon Women fans.
Well, I didn't get involved at the very first start about 8 years ago. So about 2 years after it started, I went to an event at the Filson Club, which was one of the release parties for Fred Minnick's book. My best friend and I from high school, I had just moved back to Louisville, and we went to this event at the Filson Club, and we would go in, and the Filson Club in Louisville is this beautiful, it's this beautiful kind of old building with, leather chairs, bookshelves everywhere, very antique-y. And we get served a cocktail by Joy Perini, who is like the godmother of bourbon cocktails. Exactly. Thank you. We honor her passing. Yeah. And, we didn't really know who she was at the time, but we figured out very quickly who she was. And so we saw this presentation that had Fred Minnick, Susan Riegler was there, Peggy was there, and they were talking about, Jimmy Russell was there with his wife. And so he was telling stories, and every once in a while she would just kind of glance at him when he said something just a little bit questionable, and he would correct himself. He would say, well, actually, it's this. So it was kind of cute to see the two of them together. But after that, my best friend and I joined that night. And I think the next year we had the first symposium, which I think we had about 40 or 50 women that first symposium. We had it up at French Lick. And, I've gone to pretty much every event that's been around since then. So it's just fun to be in a group of women. And I think one of my most favorite things about symposium is our presenters and speakers come into a room and the room is all women. And that is very unusual, especially 3 or 4 years ago, for these presenters and speakers to come up to a room of all women, especially when the speakers and presenters are men. And I think there's this pause that they have, like, wow, this is different. And I really think that one of the magical things about symposium is the awareness that we can do this as a group of women, and we can be engaged in the whiskey community. And it's a very open, it's a very welcoming environment. You're not trading what your most expensive bottles are. You're talking about what your favorite expression is to drink with a particular meal, or how much fun you're having with a particular event. So I love symposium for that reason alone. It's like a mix of a family reunion, a girls' weekend, and a bourbon conference all at one. So that's kind of where I got interested in Bourbon Women and how I got involved with the leadership of it. It
seems to me that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that as you point out, women don't feel that need to compare their oldest, rarest bottles, the most expensive, and sort of that little measuring competition that the guys do when they get together. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I will say that I am so used to being in tastings with all women that when I go into a tasting that's either largely men or half men and half women, it always kind of shocks me how the questions are asked and how confrontational people can be when talking with one another. Because within a group of women, we're just like, oh, I just had the best whiskey. Let me tell you about it. And it's not necessarily the most expensive whiskey, but it's like a secret that you want to pass on to your best friend. And I think that's what makes it special when women as whiskey consumers enter the market.
And I have to share, Mark, sorry, I have to share, the symposium is the only female-oriented whiskey festival in the United States that we are aware of. So, it's a pretty special thing. It is, this was the first group that was formed to cater to women. And, we have the only consumer group, or the consumer festival, that is almost exclusively women. We do get some men who come from time to time, but it's overwhelmingly women.
How many chapters are there, Maggie?
We are at 12 and growing. We generally add about 2 to 3 chapters a year, and we put that on the back burner in 2020. And so now we have a backlog of people clamoring to open their chapters, which is a great problem to have. We actually grew our membership 20% in 2020, which is pretty phenomenal.
Where are the chapters now, and how many of them are outside the U.S.? I suspect there's at least one person watching tonight who might be interested in maybe doing something in England. If I'm not mistaken, Tabitha might have some interest in this.
Well, we don't have any branches outside of the U.S. We do have some members outside of the U.S., I believe. Our branches are Atlanta, Chicago, Indianapolis, Michigan, Missouri, New York City, Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, D.C., Colorado, and Northern California.
Okay, and then what's the next place that's going to get a chapter?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I mean, I think we have several that are emerging right now. Peggy, do you know that?
Yeah. Did you say South Carolina?
That's
on the
South
brink.
Carolina's on the brink, and there are a couple of other ones that are on the brink.
Colorado
is official-ish.
Missouri.
Missouri's
official now.
Missouri is official now. Yeah, I left them off. Sorry, Missouri. I hope
Florida's on standby.
Yeah, I mean did I say Georgia? Gosh.
Yeah,
I think did say Atlanta.
Okay, Atlanta, right? Okay, yeah. So we have a lot of folks on standby, and even if you don't have a branch in your area, you don't have to have a branch to join. It just reverts to national membership, and that's one of the reasons why we were able to grow so much during 2020 was we did a quick pivot to virtual events, and we found that not only were they really popular, it was a great way to reach people who maybe didn't have a branch in their town or didn't feel comfortable with in-person events, which we weren't really having any anyway. But that's something that's going to continue because we found that we can reach a lot more people through virtual events.
And Mark, something that's really unique that I'm very proud of is, Bourbon Women is not my company. It is a separate organization, 501c6. We purposely did that so we could help legislation and lobbying. And so we work a lot with the KDA. We're not a cute little drinking club. We do serious stuff too. And the women, I have to say that she just announced all the branches. Everybody's volunteer. All the branch ambassadors are volunteer. These people do all these events. We've done over 250 events. And they do it because they love the culture and the lifestyle. So that's pretty amazing.
That's great.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, let's get to the big question from Tabitha.
Uh-oh.
How many times have the Bourbon Women been asked by men if they even like whiskey? Personally, she's lost count.
I will say I was mansplained bourbon in a whiskey bar in London, and my husband just kind of took a sip of his whiskey and he just kind of sat back and watched. He's like, "Oh, this is going to be fun."
I have to say, I actually don't get that one a whole lot because I got into Bourbon Women from, the whiskey journalism side of things. Certainly in my role as a whiskey journalist, I've had maybe a few interactions, but really not a whole lot. It's been a really great experience for me, to be honest.
Well, Mark, I have to tell you, I'm a speaker, professional speaker. I'm a master taster, right? I teach seminars all over the U.S. and internationally sometimes. And I will have male consumers in my audience trying to explain what bourbon is to me.
Yeah, sometimes you have those people where you're just like, I'm so embarrassed for you right now.
And will argue with me. And will literally try to argue with me. And I'll just go,
that's when you pull out that Bourbon Hall of Fame name tag they give you and say, yeah. Here, I got you right here, pal.
She carries that around with her to every presentation.
I need to bring my Hall of Fame skill with me on my hip.
And she's also an icon of whiskey. So, I mean, she's got the street cred.
Yeah.
But it still happens.
Although I would admit that icon of whiskey and $2.95 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Are you an icon of whiskey too, Mark? Come on.
You nominated me, remember?
I know. I did. That was me.
And as Tabitha points out, I've had a man mansplaining to me before now.
I feel for you, Tabitha.
Yeah.
Bless your heart.
I heard a really great kind of NSFW way to explain mansplaining the other day. Correctile dysfunction. So there you have it.
Ooh, I like that. That's good.
I think I'm going to have to remember that one, Maggie. I love
And
it.
Tabitha asked if I just read her mind. I think we did, actually. Yeah, because about setting up a Bourbon Women chapter. Tabitha, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with Maggie. We'll see about doing something in London. Please start a club called Bourbon and Hove. I think that's Ratcliffe. Let's see here. Okay. We'll just move on from there. As somebody points out, Watchman from Calgary, Starbucks needs to start serving bourbon.
We're not against it.
But bourbon flavored coffee would be good.
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the new distilleries the up and coming whiskey distilleries that you three have seen that we should be watching out for in the bourbon world?
Well, I don't know how well known everybody thinks of Peerless, right here in Kentucky. And even though they're not quote unquote new, I'm very impressed with how they've grown their brand. And Caleb Kilburn.
Let me pause for a second. Not necessarily new, but emerging. Saying those like 3 to 5 years old, like Jep the Creed and folks like that.
Yeah, right. Peerless would be on the top of my list for one of them. And Caleb Kilburn, who's their master distiller, I'm telling you, he's one of the youngest, brightest master distillers.
And so humble.
And I've worked so humble. He reminds me a little of like the Jimmy Russell humble, but he's so wicked talented. And I've tasted their whiskeys out of the barrel early. I've tasted them finished. I've tasted them. I think they're slaying it.
I have not had a bad Peerless yet.
Right.
Heather?
I would have to say Wilderness Trail and New Riff. Neither of them are completely new, but both of them, I have never had a bottle I haven't loved from either of those distilleries. And is that ours?
Yeah.
Peggy?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yes, please talk about the Peacock preferred selection.
Okay, I'll come back to me, but let Maggie answer, and then I'll come back and explain.
Okay, go ahead, Maggie.
There are a lot of really great and really impressive distilleries out there right now, especially, even outside of Kentucky. I'm a big fan of the American single malts right now. And there are a lot of distilleries out there that are making just really phenomenal American single malts. As far as 3 to 5 years old, there are some that maybe just started making whiskey that were doing some other things. So like Hanson's of Sonoma has a double-barreled American single malt. That was a winery that went into whiskey. There are a lot of folks who are kind of, especially in wine country in Sonoma, there are a lot of people who are making the leap from the, just winemaking to actually having a wine in their portfolio. One of the things that I really enjoy when I travel is meeting new people and new distilleries and, learning why they got into it and seeing their passion when they tell the story. And that's really my biggest thing. So I don't have any names because I don't go around remembering how long it's been open and all that kind of stuff. I talk to a lot of people, but there's a lot of really impressive stuff going on out there right now.
Well, okay, let's go with underrated ones then. Who deserves some attention and who should get some love?
Oh gosh, I really enjoy Westward Whiskey. They were that was my last place that I traveled in the before time, and they're making some really amazing stuff. I think they've been around maybe 8 or 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And then, in Texas, we've got a lot of, actually the 4 distilleries that are hosting our lunch at the symposium. I kind of, hand selected those. So there's Iron Root Republic, which I think is super underrated.
Right.
TX
really
Whiskey,
great.
making some really amazing stuff. Treaty Oak, really just breaking out of the Texas market and into the rest of the U.S. And then Garrison Brothers, which, I guess that's not really underrated. I think that's appropriately rated because people seem to really like that. But those are the 4 folks that are hosting our lunch session at Symposium next week, and they all came together. It's always really impressive. In Kentucky, we take it for granted that the distilleries are going to work together, and rising tide lifts all boats, and that doesn't really necessarily happen outside of Kentucky so much in the distilling industry. But to see these women from Texas come together and work collaboratively to put together this amazing program, it was incredibly impressive.
Heather, anybody else you can think of? And then we'll get back to that story with Peggy.
I mean, I completely agree about Westward. I absolutely love Westward. I was going to throw in a comment that you might be a bourbon woman if every time you travel, you type in distilleries near me and see what distilleries are on the way for your road trip. I've done that on Prince Edward Island and in Canada, all over the place. And which is off the topic, but we'll go back.
Yeah,
to
I went out to Blinking Owl when I was visiting my sister in California recently, and another underrated, newish distillery out there, Blinking Owl in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
I think next month I'm scheduled to go out to Frey Ranch out in Nevada. They're doing some really cool stuff as well.
They're great. Cool. They're great.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay, Peggy, go ahead.
Oh, well, so speaking of emerging, New Riff, of course, in Northern Kentucky. But we started with Bourbon Women this past year a bottle program. And it's a club membership within our club. And it's called the Preferred Peacock, okay, or Peacock Preferred. You can go to our website. Anybody can join it. And we send 4 special bottles a year to you. And the reason why they're special is because we have experts on our board. We have kind of an all-star cast, which we're so proud of. The Heathers, the Maggies, the Susan Rieglers, Monica Wolf, Stephanie Shurek. I mean, all of these people. And we literally bring our palettes together and we select at different distilleries. And then they bring their female distillery members with us along the way. And we hand select it. Then we do food pairings with it. We profile it. We have Zoom calls on it. So this was our first one with New Riff. And by the peacock feather that it's a Bourbon Women bottle. And I'll tell you, the women went wild over this. And then our next one is Wilderness Trail coming up. We're going to do a little something with Bardstown Bourbon Company that's going to knock your socks off. So if you're interested, this was a 102 proof, I think. It was phenomenal. So I think New Riff is in that category.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned Susan Riegler and then food pairings, and this is Peggy's most recent book, Which Fork Do I Use with My Bourbon, which Peggy was on the show last year when this came out, talking about setting the table for tastings and food pairings and cocktail parties and dinners, all featuring whiskeys, especially bourbons. And that's still out there on the market, right, Peggy?
It is. And, who would have thought I could launch an entertaining and bourbon book during a shutdown? It was a beautiful thing. But I have to tell you, Susan and I honestly have had a lot of fun with it regardless. And we've done 9 million virtual sessions on the book. Which fork do I use with my bourbon? I think people are getting kind of a kick out of it. That's why we did a little tongue in cheek, because the bourbon industry is very approachable and friendly. And, we're not pretentious in the way that you have to drink bourbon a certain way and you have to hold the glass and you have to drink out of this and you have to, that's just not what we're about. So we wanted to make sure that everybody felt I can do this in my home. I can do a tasting in my home. I can have my friends over. I can do food pairings in my home because I think it's enjoyable and it's meant to be enjoyed.
So give us a basic tip on how to lead a good tasting at home.
Well, I think the first thing is find out, if your group or audience, if you will, are bourbon people, because if they're really new to it, you want to think very carefully about your choices, maybe some lower proof. You might want to make some specialty cocktails, to kind of warm them up, to some of the flavors. If they are more advanced, they love bourbons, then get creative on your tasting and pick things that are geographical. So the geographic regions of bourbon, you can do different proof levels. You could do different themes of barrel picks. There's all kinds of ways to entertain your guests, especially if they love bourbon. So I don't want to tell everything. They have to get the book.
Of course. And Heather, you've actually on your website, cocktailcontessa.com, you've actually got a free ebook that people can get when they sign up for your newsletter, right?
Oh,
Yes,
more than that. Tell them what's coming, Heather.
Oh, tell them what's coming. So part of our 10-year celebration is I put together a book of bourbon cocktails. It's not just a list of bourbon cocktails, but it's really about how to come up with your own bourbon cocktails and what the elements are for different classic cocktails. And for some of those classic cocktails like the Manhattan and the Old Fashioned and the Highball, I have a cocktail lab that I describe in the book. So you can play around and have a lab, if you will, of trying different elements in a particular cocktail, because it's important to me, and I think to bourbon women, to be able to make your own riff or your own twist or your own variation on a cocktail. Because if you ask me, whiskey drinkers make the best cocktail drinkers because they're already primed to evaluate aroma, clarity, mouthfeel, texture, all of those things that mixologists take for granted as they sip things. Whiskey drinkers are already primed to be doing. So what that book has in it is not only recipes from me, but recipes from each of our branches, recipes from our leadership. And it's just a celebration of 10 years of bourbon women in cocktail form, really. So that comes out next May, on May 3rd, right before Derby next year. So we can talk about it next year around Derby if you like.
Sounds
Mark.
good to me. And let's see here. I wanted to get to this question from Tabitha. What are your favorite whiskeys outside of bourbon, and any distilleries that you like outside of the bourbon world?
Okay. Well, I've said I was an equal opportunity drinker. I love dark rum. So you mentioned Gosling's earlier, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is really good dark rum. Papa's Pilar, I enjoyed their rum. I would say Irish whiskey. I'm a big fan of Sexton. I liked it. I tried it for the first time at a conference, and I thought, man, this is really, really good. And then if I go to Scotch, it'd have to be really a heavy, like Ardbeg. I really like that.
We got to work on your Irish whiskey tastes there, Peggy, but Sexton's not bad, but there are much...
I enjoy it.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just...
Yeah.
It's in the ballpark, but there are some really classic Irish whiskeys out there.
Oh, I'm confident. And see, that's the beauty of it. I love learning.
Yeah, we all do.
I still love, after all these years in the industry, I am still as curious as I was when I was 20 something.
Yeah, same here. I learn new stuff every day. I'm learning stuff from you three tonight. So let's see here. We are getting comments from Dave Kuhn, which is better, a savory pairing like cheese or a sweet pairing like chocolate? Of course, yes. Why not both? Yes.
You mind if I take this?
Go for it.
Please do.
Well, first of all, both is fine. But this is the thing about bourbon food pairings. It depends on the bourbon that you're tasting. And the reason why I say that is because when I go do a food pairing, I will taste the bourbon first and say, what is the predominant note? Is it sweet, spicy, earthy, savory, and I'll identify it. So to the point of saying chocolate, if I get some chocolate notes in it, I'm all about it. If I got some really rich caramel notes, I'm all about it because that goes great with chocolate. So that's kind of how I do it. On the cheese side of things, like Maker's Mark, I would never put a Maker's Mark with a blue cheese because it's a wheated bourbon and it's so much lighter that the blue cheese is going to go, and so I would put Maker's Mark with goat cheese or Gouda. So that's kind of how I look at intensity and predominant flavors of the whiskey.
I'm catching some grief for slamming on the Sexton, and I'm not slamming on them. I just had to deal with the Sexton folks yesterday because they announced this deal where they're the official whiskey of The Walking Dead's final season.
I saw the hand.
And so, I'm just looking at that. So that's where it's got me. I'm going.
Does that mean the whiskey's really musty?
Yeah.
Is that what that means? Okay.
Well, yeah. There were jokes about it tasting sort of like embalming fluid or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know what the correlation is. I thought it was very nutty.
And then, McEwen always said pair an unpeated whiskey with a non-smoky cheese and vice versa. Well, yeah, that sort of makes sense. Nurse Dave, I will state with all... Whoops, Dave Kuhn says, oops, got that backward. You pair an unpeated whiskey with a smoky cheese and vice versa. And then Nurse Dave, I will state with all confidence that Oreos pair well with any whiskey.
Amen.
Hand to God.
No, even better. I keep threatening one of these years I'm going to do a taste test with Girl Scout cookies and whiskey pairings.
Will you have us back on for that, and we'll be in Girl Scout outfits?
I still have my sash.
Oh, we'll get our badges?
We'll get a badge. We'll get our
I still have my Girl
badges
Scout sash. I can totally do that. And by the way, Mark, Oreos are vegan, so there you go.
You're good. You can legally have them in the house,
technically
Mark.
McDonald's is vegan because there's no meat in any of that stuff either. But Graham Fraser, are any experiments like wood finishes that you would consider as a possible future direction for whiskeys?
Oh, 100%.
Explain, Maggie.
100%. Maggie, go ahead.
I mean, there are a lot of folks who are doing stuff with stave finishes, secondary barrel finishes, all kinds of, approaches to getting, kind of a different finish or flavor profile into a standard bourbon profile. So this is really interesting because the staves that they used for this, the FAE stands for fatty acid esters. So it was really a lot of those, fatty acids from that tree that made its way into this product, and it is just absolutely fantastic. There are a lot of folks who are doing secondary barrel finishes, experimenting with like toasted barrels. Maker's Mark probably has one of the most extensive research bases for this. That's what they do for their private select. So you can go in and select a combination of 10 different staves. I think they have 5 options. 1,001 combinations. I remember that. Jane will be proud. But it's really interesting how different woods and different, there's the option of French oak that's seared, French oak that's toasted. You can get the cuvee stave that, it's got some ridges and it's like toasted, and there's like a chocolate one, and then they discontinued that, the mocha, and then they brought in a new one that was like kind of a replacement for that. So it's really interesting to see the different treatments, like physical treatments and toasting, charring, all that kind of stuff that can play into this kind of finish. So definitely take a look at any of the Maker's Mark wood finishing series or private selects.
I got to tell you, I'm excited about finishes. And I know that originally everybody got a little confused, and I think even TTB got confused on how to define the finish in its bourbon. I know that's shocking,
right?
Shocking, but it happened. And so I wrote an article for American Whiskey Magazine about finishes. And of course, Maker's Mark was in there as well, but I talked to the Cooperage Independent Stave, and it's remarkable what they're doing on innovation. But I'm excited for the flavor profiles of, Cabernet barrels, Calvados, sherry barrels like Angel's Envy has done. There's so much opportunity and innovation. This is a game changer. If you really think about it, it's a game changer because bourbon has always had to follow such a strict definition. And, we've loved that. It's kept our consistency. It's like protecting champagne, so we're all about it. But this is a twist in a good way that is innovative, flavorful for the consumer, and allows new expressions to come out all the time. So just like Maggie said, some people are steeping, chips into a barrel. Some are inserting staves. Some are using whole casks, of other like rums and things like that. So I find it just a playground of flavors.
And I would say that that's one of the things we really enjoyed about picking the 10th anniversary bottle at Starlight at Huber's. So backstory here, I went to high school with several of the Hubers people. I'm from that area, so I know the Hubers, and it's kind of a joke in my family that I know the Hubers and that now they're into whiskey because originally I just went to high school with them, right? So when we went up there to do the barrel pick, what really impressed me was they had really changed their brand and kind of focused on what they could do well. And they originally were a winery, so they knew wine barrels, and they knew what the barrels were going to do, what they did for wine, and they wanted to experiment with what they did with whiskey. And I pulled aside, the people who were working with us, and I said, you guys have really narrowed down your market in an excellent way because they have the knowledge about wine to really do those barrel finishes that a lot of distilleries may not have. And I think they're doing it really well. I think they're really experimenting in ways that are both innovative, but also that will really appeal to whiskey drinkers as well.
So wait a second, Heather, you grew up in southern Indiana, north of the river, and moved south, right?
Well, I grew up in Jeffersonville, which is right across the river. Okay. So I went to school with the Huber's kids, and then I moved to Tennessee for 17 years, and now I'm back here.
Okay. Because we didn't talk about this before, but I am originally from southern Indiana, from up around Bloomington, Brown County area. And usually when somebody moves across the river and goes south, when a Hoosier moves south into Kentucky, they call it artificial intelligence.
Come on.
I would agree with that. As a Hoosier, yes, I would agree with that.
Well, you gained 10 IQ points crossing south of the river.
Well, yes, and both my parents went to IU Bloomington, so I spent a lot of time going up. Yeah, okay, so
what do you do?
My parents were very...
What do you do when somebody from Indiana throws a bomb across to Kentucky?
Light it and throw it back.
Light it and throw it back, yeah.
We used to have one in Indiana that said, why can't they sell Cheerios in Louisville? Because Kentuckians will plant them for donut seeds.
Oh, my God.
Now, Dave Kuhn, we're getting some recommendations on the Girl Scout pairings. We're getting some.
When we agreed to be on this show, I thought it was a nice show to be on.
I told a joke on Hoosiers for crying out loud. Come on. Now, Dave Kuhn suggests the Girl Scout Samoa's cookies are what they call them, caramel delights now, with Angel's Envy rye.
Oh
yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yep.
That's brilliant.
And Watchman 99, the Thin Mints would go well with the rye whiskey, too.
Interesting.
Michter's rye. I've tried that. That's really good with the Michter's rye.
And Bill Ricker is willing to be judgmental of booze. I'm quoting here now, and I've met your daughter, Bill, so I hope she hears this. I said of one, this is the harshest 21-year-old, aside from my daughter, of course. I hope she hears this because you deserve to get dunked on for that one. Let's see. Tabitha, it was a session pairing Japanese whiskey with sushi that got her started on her whiskey obsession. Blame Dave Broom for that.
Oh, yes. Dave Broom is one of our speakers at the symposium. We're so excited. He's going to do a Scotch kind of master class. But I love Asian food and bourbon. I call it counterbalance because that spike of heat and that, vanilla caramel overlay, it tames it like a spiced pecan and a Riesling. That's kind of the effect.
Well, Peggy, talk about your wasabi peas and pairings that you do all the time.
Yeah, one of my favorite bar snacks, just to have sitting on my bar when people come over, whatever, is wasabi peas. And everybody goes, oh my gosh, I'm not going to eat wasabi peas with bourbon and my mouth would inflame. And I'm like, no, do it. It's quite the opposite.
She made me a believer. I was skeptical. Yeah. She made me a believer.
Yeah.
And as Chris Ratcliffe points out, Indian food and a good rye would be quite a pairing as well.
I agree. I could totally see that.
Let's see. Dave Kuhn, also one of the best pairing experiences is at Dalwhinnie Distillery, a chocolatier that supplies truffles they will pair for you. Tell us about it, Heather.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Did this.
I did it the year before shutdown. Like everything's going to be before
in
after
the before
COVID
time,
now, right?
Yes.
Yep.
In the before time, we went to Scotland and we decided neither of us had Scotch before, really. So we decided we would do Speyside Scotch because it's not super smoky. So we decided to do this 3-day whiskey tour. We're out in the middle of you're out in the middle of Scotland and it looks exactly like central Kentucky, except there are sheep instead of horses. So really, it's very similar. Okay. So you're on these roads and it's all twisty, just like central Kentucky. And we go to Dalwhinnie, which I think was the first one we went to. And for every whiskey, I think we had 8 or 9 whiskey pairings and they were half dram. So they were small amounts, but there were 8 or 9. there was a different truffle paired with each one. And all the truffles were immaculate. They were not just tasty, but they were beautiful with all this beautiful shaping. And it was just an amazing experience.
Well, speaking of bourbon, whiskey and truffles, that's actually going to be one of our seminars at the symposium next week. We are having a Distillery 291 takeover of Art Eatables. So they are going to do a Distillery 291 pairing with Art Eatables truffles.
It's going to be amazing.
The content that we've created, and I think the women are going to be blown away.
We have some really amazing programming coming up next week for sure.
And Distillery 291, if you're not familiar with it, is out in Colorado Springs for our viewers who aren't familiar with it.
They're making some nice whiskey.
And they're
Michael
one of the
Myers
ones
is doing
that's
some
really
good stuff.
experimenting with some of those finishes. They're actually using aspen staves a lot, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do, Maggie? I haven't had that before.
I haven't had it in a while. Yeah, Mark's going to tell us all about it, I feel like. Is that what you're reaching for there?
He's reaching
probably
back.
got it right there. They're really tall bottles, so they only fit on your tall shelves. I found, yep, that's the one. So it's really kind of, it feels like you're in a forest of conifers, if that makes any sense.
Well, it did, like kind of evergreen.
Yeah, it's like this really kind of bright
very bright.
Not
I think
quite
it's
juniper,
very bright.
but yeah, it's like
evergreen.
a really bright evergreen.
Fresh.
It's like a Christmas whiskey.
Give me 30 seconds to get a fresh glass here. So talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, 291 is one of the ones that's experimenting with some different wood staves with the aspen wood, obviously. There are some others that are doing like mesquite wood, especially in the American single malts. You see, in Virginia, there's Copper Fox doing the American single malts that are smoked with peach wood and apple wood. In the Southwest, there are several that are doing American single malts that are smoked with mesquite wood. And, it's just really interesting to see all those different options that are out there right now.
Yeah, Balcones does a nice mesquite one.
Oh, do they? Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. One of the things I love about all the different barrel finishes, and because I'm a cocktail geek, is I like to pick out the flavors in a particular whiskey and see how I could either expand on them or kind of balance them with other flavors. And so, when I think about all the barrel finishes, all I can think of is I'm going to need that whiskey eventually because I'm going to need it for a cocktail because they're all so different. You can really kind of balance and kind of create a cocktail that really pulls out flavors from the particular expression.
And we're getting a lot of great comments here. Whiskey Canuck from Montreal was at a tasting with Islas and oysters, and that turned him on to peated Scotch.
Oh, that'd be delicious with oysters.
I was at a table with Pam Heilman years ago, and we ordered some oysters, and she said, take a drop of the Michter's Rye and put it in your oyster and try it. And it was phenomenal. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Briny, it's unusual. Nobody would think of pickles and bourbon but sometimes briny works.
Pickleback.
That's salt. Yeah. The salt of it really changes the flavor of bourbon. Sometimes what I've done is actually taken a pour of bourbon and just added a couple drops of saline solution to it and compare it to the regular pour, and it really changes the flavor. Just a couple drops. It doesn't take much, but it really kind of alters the mouthfeel and the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
I like this comment from Chris Radcliffe. Damn those tall bottles. Forget labeling and age statements. We need a max bottle height. Yeah.
I am with you because I had to have my husband use the 291 bottle to measure the space between my shelves when he was putting them up.
Yeah, I've only got one shelf I can put this on.
Yep, they're really tall.
I think New Riff is tall.
Yeah, New Riff is also, but I think 291 is a little bit taller. That's my tallest one. So that's what I gave him for a measuring stick.
I have one tequila bottle, Espinita, that's even taller than either of those. And so when I put my bar in downstairs, I'm going to have to measure according to that bottle.
And Graham Fraser says Aberfeldy matches their whiskey with different styles of honey. That's an amazing combination, too.
Mm-hmm. That sounds fun.
And as soon as I pulled this off the shelf, and I for the three of you, I have to explain, Crump is our resident sort of pain in the ass smart aleck. It's time for Mark-splaining. No, I am not going to Mark-splain, but...
I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, as Dave points out, who are these three going to have as their guest next week on the webcast?
We're taking over.
Join us.
We're taking
This has
over.
got some, this is...
Maggie and Heather, I've always wanted my own podcast.
Yeah.
I
We
think
just
the
take Mark.
time
We
is
can
now.
do it.
The time is now.
Oh, the pine on this is amazing. I mean, it's
Exactly.
more pine
I
than
think it's
aspen.
very evergreen.
Yeah.
Yeah, very evergreen.
Evergreen. It's like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah.
like Christmas tree sap.
Yeah.
Have you ever had Becherovka liqueur? It's kind of a piney liqueur.
No.
I'm trying to
I've
think
not
if
had
that would taste like that, because I haven't had the 291.
That'd make a great Christmas drink, Heather, for a cocktail.
Yeah.
I've got some 291 we can experiment with after next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got your Christmas.
Bring me
I
a
got your
sample
Christmas
bottle.
drink.
What's
Knob
that?
Creek smoked maple.
Oh, yeah.
With
The
what?
women I live with refer to it as the 10 a.m. bourbon because it smells like pancakes and bacon.
Well, it is really good added to maple syrup, I will say.
Any bourbon
Yeah.
can be 10 a.m. bourbon if you try hard enough.
But this is one they poured that one year instead of mimosas for Christmas morning.
Oh, interesting.
I want to hang out at your house on Christmas.
Yeah.
Well,
I
there
like
was a
that.
time when several years ago we brined the Thanksgiving turkey in an entire bottle of Johnny Walker Red.
Oh,
How did that turn out?
We did not burn the house down with a
I was
gas
going to say
oven.
your oven did not
Congratulations.
blow up. Your oven
But
did not blow
no,
up.
the alcohol evaporated off, and the turkey was moist. It picked up all the flavors, all the spices, and it was really one of the best birds we'd had in years.
My husband just
Wow.
started doing, so he will do, he makes his ribs in braising liquid. So he has a dry rub that he leaves on there for 24 hours, and then he puts it in a foil pack with a braising liquid. And forever and ever, he would either do soda or beer. And at one point, he was going to make some ribs recently, and I said, well, why don't we try some bourbon in there? I mean, I have, we're not running out. So, and I don't keep beer around usually.
Yeah.
So we tried some bourbon in the ribs, and it just made it so good. I mean, you didn't even need any sauce or anything. It made its own sauce, and the ribs were fall off the bone amazing.
Christina does this before when she was cooking meat, when the kids still lived here, this drunken tenderloin with either a pork or a beef tenderloin. Take a Tupperware container in the morning and then lay out the tenderloin in there with a cup of bourbon. And then close it up and then put it in the refrigerator all day. And then at the end of the day, bring it out and put it on the grill. And it soaked up the bourbon throughout the day.
I endorse
good.
that.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I use bourbon in a lot of my marinades.
Yeah, it really just adds, and you can even go so geeky as to, pick out the right flavor profile. When we did the ribs the other day, we did some Wild Turkey Rye 101, which was really great. When we did it before, we did Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. So you can just really pick out the flavor profile that you want for those, whatever you're working with.
No, this 291, the Aspen finish, is really it's like a pine explosion, like a pine air freshener almost, but still has all the balance of a bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very nice. Let's see here. Graham Fraser says, bet that improved the Johnny Walker Red. No comment. It was a very good use of it. But no, Johnny Red is not bad. Chris Ratcliffe was asking Tabitha, the Macmira that was in pine wine barrels. They've done Macmira in Sweden has done some fun stuff with some of the local berry wines and pine sap finished
wow.
barrels.
Interesting.
And
wow.
York
Very
sap is made with birch sap.
Oh,
Ooh, I bet that would be really good.
how do we get that?
Yes, how do
Angela
we get that?
D'Orazio. We need to get you in touch with her. You know Angela, right, Maggie?
Oh gosh, I don't think
She's
that
their
I do.
master blender at
Okay.
Macmira in Sweden. We need to get you in touch with her because
Please do.
No, I don't
Because you know what?
you need to invite her over for Bourbon Women because she's doing some really cool stuff for this symposium.
Yes,
That would be next year.
I want you to introduce me because one of the things that I've been doing on the Bourbon Women blog is the Meet the Makers series.
Yes.
So when I first started, I just started as the president in January this year, and I kept hearing, what's it like being a woman in a male-dominated industry? And I was like, but it's not. And so I started a series about different women in all aspects of the brown water industry. And I'm not going to run out of subject matter I could probably do this for 3 or 4 years before I started to get desperate. It comes out every Monday, bourbonwomen.org, called Meet the Makers. The one that we featured this week is Brittany Penny. She's the founder of the 9 Bourbon. She is the first Black woman CEO of a Kentucky bourbon brand. So there are some pretty amazing women out there doing some really amazing stuff.
Let's name some other folks besides Nicole Austin, who did the Dickel bourbon, and we know she's done some great stuff at Dickel and other distilleries before that. Who are some of the other women out there that we should be watching for?
Well,
besides the usual suspects, the Rachel Berrys, the Stephanie McLeods, the Maureen Robinsons.
There's so many.
There are
so many. I mean, I'm just going to go through and read off some of our Meet the Makers. So Brittany Penny, Crooked Water Spirits, Heather Manley. She started the business because she tried, specific liqueur, and she was like, wow, I think it was a dill liqueur. And she was like, wow, this is really interesting and amazing. I wonder if I can add to the distilling landscape by making something unique. And so she started a distillery. Screwball Whiskey, which is everybody's favorite peanut butter whiskey, co-founded by Brittany Merrill Yang. We've got Camille Austin, who is the director of advocacy for Casa Lumbre in Mexico. She's very knowledgeable about the history of corn there. Lori Karsich founded Country Smooth Whiskey. Lost Lantern co-founder Nora Gainley Roper. We have a lot of really amazing folks on the series, and, we just want to help get their stories out. But Heather, who are some of the ones that are on your radar?
I was thinking of Alex Castle, Old Dominic, just because
she was our first one. She was our first Meet the Makers.
Was she our first one? She has so long been a supporter of bourbon women. I just personally love her because she's such a good person and she's so much fun.
And she's wildly talented and was trained by Jimmy Russell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that about her.
Yeah, Jimmy's actually been far more progressive than a lot of people would think.
Absolutely.
For sure.
For an old white Kentucky guy.
I got to tell you, in all sincerity, because I recently was asked this, who made a difference in my career? Who was a man that made a difference in my career? And it's not that, Jimmy and I worked for competitors, right? He was Wild Turkey and I was Brown Foreman. But I will tell you, all the industry events when I was in my 20s and early 30s, every time I saw he and Jaretta, they treated me like royalty and was always interested in what I was doing, how I was doing. We would, talk about whiskey. We would talk about home. We would talk about farming. Just whatever we would talk about every single time. And he is one of the men, the greatest for so many reasons. But in my life, in that day and age that I was dealing with all kinds of guys, that were not so nice. He was a breath of fresh air, and I will treasure him for that.
And we recently had an event with his granddaughter, Joanne Street. She's another woman to watch, and she's actually going to be one of our keynote speakers at the symposium this year, along with Bruce Russell.
That's great. I didn't even have a chance to pull it up, but I've got a picture of Joanne with Jimmy and Jaretta from the All-Star Sampler at the Bourbon Festival a couple of years ago, where I took it of the three of them together.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's
and
made sure that they got it. They got a copy of it.
What we learned from our event with Joanne was that Jaretta actually worked at Wild Turkey before Jimmy and got Jimmy the job.
I didn't hear that, but I heard she was in the accounting office and she was the one doing all the payroll. So she knew how much Jimmy was making before she married him.
Oh, wow. And she married him anyway.
And she did.
I heard that, she made him go work for the distillery because he was getting all up in her business. So she was like, go get a job, go work at the distillery. You need to do something during the day.
So we got Jaretta. I love Jaretta Russell.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah, so we got her to thank for all this.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
because she's the one who lit the fire under Jimmy's butt back in the 50s.
For sure.
Have the Bourbon women any links with women in the Scotch whiskey industry? That's a question from Graham Fraser over in England.
Well, it's something I think we should aspire to. I know, in my world, in my life, in my career, Rachel Berry and I met very, very early on, and we served on one of the first female panels at a whiskey fest. And she and I still see her on Facebook, and we'll, every now and then send each other notes. She's someone I want to bring over. I tried to bring over at one time, to do a speech at Symposium, and, that darn 2020 hit, and we weren't able to do it, of course.
Let's see. Dave Kuhn, is there a female celebrity carrying any kind of mantle of exposure or awareness for the whiskey industry? I'm going to vary this question a little bit. Is there a female celebrity that's doing it based on a love of whiskey and not as a sex symbol?
You mean an owner of a whiskey, or a
Hollywood type, an influencer who's not just?
I can't name one.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that Mila Kunis is really necessarily in it as a sex symbol. Is that the read that you get on that? I feel like she actually genuinely loved it.
No, not at all. I'm just saying I don't know a female celebrity who I could say is really promoting a whiskey brand right now, like other...
Or promoting whiskey in general, or is known for her love of whiskey. The same way, for instance, Lauren Bacall was known for her love of Jack Daniels back in the day.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to do some research on that and get back to you, Mark.
I think that's a good challenge.
Yeah, that is a good challenge.
Yeah. Do you know any celebrities, Mark?
We would love to speak to them.
Yes.
Have them call us.
Yeah, that'll happen.
You've got our information.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Call us. We're happy to talk to them.
I'd like to talk to him as well, but all I can find right now, I would love to find a female celebrity willing to put her name on a whiskey brand, because all I find are a bunch of ex-athletes and somewhat celebrities, but we don't see any women any female celebrities or actresses putting their name on whiskey brands.
Well,
and I don't know why.
Yep.
So, as Chris Ratcliffe points out, Pink is quite the whiskey fan, apparently loves a Lafroig. Interesting.
Oh, she's a neat lady. I like her a lot.
I like Lafroig. Go Pink.
I like Pink. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to find out more about that. We don't count Matthew McConaughey. He has that Y chromosome. Come on, Dave. You know better.
We have the same haircut, though.
But you don't have the draw. Maggie.
Give her a few drinks and she'll have a draw. I've seen her.
I will.
There you go. I get more Southern. I do. After
okay, Maggie, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to give you a chance. Any good whiskey and cigar pairings, because I know that you know cigars almost as well as you know whiskey.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually have some cigars on my desk right now that I'm going to be looking at right now. I've got some diesels here. Cohiba did a collab with Weller. And then we've also got the Buffalo Trace collab with, let's see, who was that? I can't remember who did this. But these are going to be the next ones I'm looking at. So this is really interesting because unlike a lot of cigars where they'll be like whiskey dipped or whiskey infused or something like that, they actually design the flavor profile of this to complement the whiskey. So I'm going to be really interested to see how this turns out. I will say here, let's crack open the magazine, the latest issue of American Whiskey Magazine, and see what I said, because I wrote it like 4 months ago and I don't remember. Let's see here. And
they say whiskey doesn't improve your memory.
Well, I'm parenting in a pandemic, so, we got to give me some grace. So with the FAE01 that I'm drinking, I did a La Perla Habana 1515 Robusto. That's this guy right here. Okay. And then I've got the Buzzard's Roost, roasted chicken that I paired with a Monte Cristo Nicaragua series, which is a new one from Monte Cristo within the last year or so. Then I've got a Hirsch Horizon with a Camacho Hard Charger from 2018, limited edition. And then Old Line, with a Drew Estate Factory Smokes. So these are my latest round of pairings in American Whiskey Magazine. So definitely give those a try.
Cool.
I'm surprised you didn't do the Drew Estate with the Brixton, their series, their own whiskeys that John Drew's done.
So the Brixton was really interesting, right? So it wasn't a whiskey; it was half whiskey and half rum. And they're getting a little hard to find now. I think they've been discontinued. He also did the John Drew Rye, which was like a 95. It was either a 95.5 or 100% rye. It was very, very rye, which was a nice one. So, you know, my pairing philosophy is to find things that balance each other out or complement each other or enhance each other in some way, which is actually, it's funny, when I started working with Peggy, she has special names for these, like Pop and Sis. I don't know, I'm making those up, but she has special names for her pairings, but that's basically the same philosophy that I use for pairing whiskey and cigars.
I will admit it's something I know nothing about. I've never touched a cigar. I have no desire to. I've never smoked anything in my life, so if you can do it, I respect it, but no desire to partake myself.
You know, I always tell people, like, I don't want to turn you into a bourbon drinker or a cigar smoker. I just want you to be happy and stay hydrated.
Yep, works for me. Any final thoughts? Tell us anything that's coming up at Symposium next week that we haven't covered already.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, let's start with Peggy. Yeah. I have something to talk about because I'm going to tell a little story on Mark here when we get around to me, but I want to hear what Peggy has to say about Symposium.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, I think what's so cool is we have these very private excursions that are happening, like Maker's Mark. We're going to be going to a restaurant called 610 Magnolia. And it's part of the Lee initiative that we're donating to this year. It's our philanthropy. And Bill will be there. Jane Bowie will be there. I mean, it's like the all-star crew doing a blending exercise. Now, can you imagine the experience that you'd have, you know, with that? And then, you know, there's other excursions that's happening. We're going to Jephthah Creed. We're going to the Louisville Water Company, for goodness sakes, to learn about water and whiskey and limestone and all of those things. And so I think that we've just created what I call soft adventure. And so I'm just excited for the women to come back together and enjoy these things again. Because as Heather had mentioned, some people come back every year, and now aunts are bringing their nieces, you know, or goddaughters, or, you know, when they turn 21, it's almost become this rite of passage to come to our conference. And that is so cool for me.
Well, Jephthah Creed, we haven't really talked about that one. It's Joyce and Autumn Nethery, mother-daughter team that run that place.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
And they're using Bloody Butcher corn, and they're making some really phenomenal bourbon.
Oh, love it.
And they have always been great supporters of Bourbon Women. I mean,
from day one.
We've had some great excursions with them, and we always do every year. So, you know, with Peggy, I would just say that every year our excursions get better and better. And although we might go to some of the same distilleries, the experience is never the same. Yeah. I mean, we get to take women to Vendome, which is not open for public tours.
Right,
so they get to see,
oh, that's cool.
They get to see. That was on one of my bourbon. I have a bourbon experience bucket list. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to do. And, you know, Peggy facilitated that, where it's not just about the barrel. It's not just about the juice. It's about the still and how it's made. And seeing that was just, I don't want to say it's life-changing, but it really alters your perception of the art that goes into creating the stills and putting them together. So I just get excited.
And it's only 30 people, 25 people?
It's only 25 or 30 people. And we try to do it every year that we have Symposium. And I just hope people understand how rare an experience that is. Because in Kentucky, you can't really go into Vendome. You can drive past it. And in the summer, they have the doors open so you can look and see what they're doing inside. But you can't go really inside and tour it. And that's a completely different experience.
I got to ask, Heather, what else is on that bucket list?
Well, you know, I had going to Scotland and doing the whiskey tour. Actually, I had whiskey judging at a whiskey competition on my bourbon bucket list. And I got to do that about a month and a half ago. And honestly, one of my bourbon bucket lists was presenting at Symposium, which I get to do this year with the ice the ice presentation. So I need some more items actually for my bourbon bucket list.
You got to raise a barrel. You got to go raise a barrel sometime.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Well, I've been to a cooperage, but I haven't actually raised a barrel. So that's a good one. Anything else you think I should add?
You know, the thing that made me realize I was at the end of my bourbon bucket list, living my dream, was skeet shooting with Jimmy Russell.
Oh, yeah, that would do it.
That would do it.
I was like, okay, well, yeah. I can die happy now.
Or fly fishing on the Spey side.
Oh,
on the
that would be
Spey
a
River.
good one.
Oh,
That would be a good
I
one.
haven't done that.
Dave Kuhn says harvesting peat. I've done that.
I need to go and do like the Scotch experiences.
At Lefroy raking the malted barley.
Yep.
That was
done that at Highland Park.
I would enjoy sitting and sipping Scotch, watching somebody else harvest the peat.
Done that too. It works. It's much
I'm
better.
what we call indoorsy.
Yeah.
No, you can still be outside. You just sit there in the nice chair and you have your glass and just
yes.
Nice work, guys. Keep going. Good job.
I mean, I recently got to go to Mexico and watch how they do tequila and mezcal, and that was really life-changing as well. I'm just a distillery geek. I think what it comes down to is I love learning about the distillation of spirits, and any kind of spirits really will enthrall me. So I guess I'm not too picky.
And I saw somebody say...
I got to say that when you said agave, one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my career was going to Cuervo. And going out to the agave field, it was this VIP tour, and they handed a machete to me. I put on these big gloves, and they gave me a machete and taught me how to hack the agave plant. It was hotter than haze, and dirt up to, and it was so gritty and real. I thought I was the coolest person in the world.
That's awesome. Yeah. My kids have machetes.
Will be, and you have good insurance too, right?
Yes.
And you're happy about that?
They have their wood chips, so they're scouts. They have their wood chips.
Oh, yeah.
They know how to handle.
They're toting chips.
Yeah. They're good.
They're fun.
Dave Kuhn points out, any Ian MacArthur story told in front of you is always a treat. I've been in the peat bogs at Isla with Ian at Lagavulin.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
Cool.
That would be amazing.
Graham Fraser, I must have led a good life. I've done most of those bucket list things mentioned. If that's the case, yes, you have. Maggie, any final thoughts from you on what we can expect next week at Symposium?
Well, I'm going to tell a story on you. So
go for it.
Mark and I.
Yeah, we'd rather make fun of you than
hey, I'm used to it.
Mark and I were at the Master Distillers auction at the Oscar Getz Museum at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival several years ago, and we were both on the front row, and we were bidding against each other for a copy of Oscar Getz's book. And
which
so
I have too. So,
oh hell, I had the winning bid, and it was about to be closed. And I look over, and Mark leans over and gives me the evil eye and outbids me right at the last second, letting Mr. Oscar Getz slip right through my fingers.
I see you got it though.
I was a little salty about it until I found a copy from a used book dealer that is actually signed by Oscar Getz.
Oh,
Maggie.
So I'm no longer salty about it. You are forgiven.
Okay.
Oh, speaking of Oscar, Maggie, tell them about our auction.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to promote the auction here.
That was the segue into the Bourbon Women's Symposium silent auction is going to be on Handbid, which is a website, or you can get it on an app. We just opened it up at 5:15 today. So Carol texted me this link while I was on the show.
Good job, Carol.
And among some of the most amazing things that we have is a bottle of Oscar Pepper bourbon that was distilled in 1917.
Wow.
And it is the fill level is good.
It's in the office.
It is
it's
gorgeous.
Literally behind me. Could I go get it?
Yeah, go get it, Peggy.
Let's see it.
And then tell us how it tastes.
It's still in its coffin. I wrapped it in a bubble wrap coffin, and because I had to drive it over to Peggy's, and I was like, I've never possessed.
You trusted Peggy with this
expensive. So
and you had to buy new tires.
I had to get new tires before I would go pick it up.
I'm nervous carrying it across
Don't
the
drop
room.
it, Peggy.
So this is
Wow.
up for auction right now on hand bid for our 2021 Symposium Silent
Look
Auction.
at that. Look at that.
Isn't that gorgeous?
So it's 1917.
Yes.
1917. And the seal is as crisp, unbroken.
Yep. The cork looks good. The fill level.
Look at the color.
Look at the fill level on
Wow.
that. I mean, to have something that old with a fill level like that, that is pretty phenomenal.
I'm nervous to hold it. I got to put it back in its coffin.
I had it in my office, and I like literally locked my office because we have a cat, and I'm like, "Better not. You better not."
Yep.
And I was like, I have to get this out of my house, so I had to take it over to Peggy, who has no animals, fortunately.
You're trusting Peggy with this, though?
You know what? I wrapped it in a lot of bubble wrap and put it in a box.
I'm not talking about the wrapping it up. I'm talking about her drinking it.
Well, you know, if she drinks, you drink, you buy. So
you drinky, you buy.
That's right. That's right. We got a pretty hefty reserve on that, so that would be a bad decision. But
what's
we got
the
a lot
reserve
of really
just
great...
for shits and giggles?
So the bidding starts at $8,000.
Oh, shit. That's out of my price range.
Is $12,000, and the buy it now price is $40,000, and it is valued at $25,000.
Yeah, I put it back in bubble wrap. I'm nervous.
Yeah,
but there's over how many items? Did you?
So I think we've got right around 50 items. It's somewhere between 46 and 50.
Can you add one to that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I will donate a set of 6 Whiskey Cask Glencairns, a box of them.
Ooh, yay.
Thank
and
you.
Maggie, I'll send it to you this
you.
week. If you want to put that in there, I will donate a set of 6 of those.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you can send me a picture of that so I can upload it, that would be amazing. Thank you.
And this will help support our organization, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. And so this auction, actually, a portion of what we make on this auction is going to go to the Lee Initiative, which I don't know if everybody who's watching is familiar with that, because you got some folks from overseas. Chef Ed Lee is a James Beard award-winning chef who has several restaurants here in Louisville, Kentucky. And when the pandemic hit, he shut down one of his most popular restaurants, Milkwood, and turned it into a distribution center to make sure that the folks in the restaurants who are out of work were able to get food and meals and things like that they needed for their families. Because, you know, those are really uncertain times. And Maker's Mark stepped in and said, hey, why don't we do a special bottle? And they did the first community batch and sold that, and the profits went to the Lee Initiative. And so that has been sustaining a lot of members. And it was not just in Louisville. Once they started to get monetary donations, they started to be able to open outposts in other places to support,
which is pretty amazing.
to be able to support those restaurant and hospitality workers. So that is why we chose that charity this year to be the beneficiary of our auction, because without our hospitality folks, we have no cocktails, we have no wonderful dinners. You know, we need those folks to stay safe and be taken care of, so that when everything is in the rear view mirror, we can go back to enjoying all of that again. So
Amen.
that's what we're working on right now. So bid it
it's
up.
a worthwhile cause. I'm glad to support it. We will. Maggie, email me the address to send it to.
Absolutely.
After we get off the air, you got my email address. We'll send that box out.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Thank you for coming.
And
And
so much fun.
Let's just announce it now. Next year, we're going to do the webcast live from Symposium.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
We have nothing to lose but my dignity.
That's right.
But we'll make sure you have a good time with
But
it.
you know what?
yeah.
I think we need you to bring a daughter or two also.
I was going to say this should be a family affair.
Oh, God help us all.
And bring your daughters. For sure.
We're
Well,
going to have a great time.
one of them might not be able to come because she's out in medical school in California. One isn't crazy about whiskey, and the other one loves whiskey, so we'll bring at least the one that loves whiskey.
Okay.
Well, bring the one that doesn't. We'll change your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. These experiences will change your mind.
Or we'll just
I'm
make
telling
sure
you,
she's
we'll change
hydrated
her mind.
and happy.
We'll totally.
We'll give it a try.
Give her to us. We'll take over.
Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight.
It was a ton
This
of fun.
was a blast, and
Absolutely.
folks have said if we ought to just have this more time.
Thank you, Spirit Mom. We love you too.
I think we're popular.
Yeah, Spirit Bomb's going to want to open up the chapter in England. Whiskey Canuck in Canada. Just put 3 inches of bubble wrap down on your floor, Peggy.
I basically have that right now.
Seriously, yeah.
Okay, thanks again. Peggy No Stevens, Maggie Kimberl, Heather Wibbels, and CocktailContessa.com, BourbonWomen.com. Check the websites out, and you can follow them all on Twitter or Instagram. Heather, I know you're not on Twitter. I looked. And
I am, but it's Cocktail Contest, not Cocktail
That's why
I was looking for it, and I couldn't find it
yesterday.
Yeah, it cuts off, that 15th letter. It only lets you do 14, so it has to be Cocktail Contest.
Well,
yeah.
And Mark, if they're looking for my book, it's on Amazon.
It is on Amazon, and here's the title: "Which fork do I use with my bourbon?" And don't use the plastic fork. Which fork is it? The big fork, the tall fork, or the skinny, or the little fork, the dessert fork?
Any fork you choose, because that's how we are.
Amen.
That's how bourbon is.
Peggy, Heather, Maggie, thank you. Have a great time. Stay safe next week at Symposium, and I promise to be out there next year.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, cheers.
Take care.
That's our Happy Hour live webcast from last Friday night, August 20th, with Heather Wibbels, Maggie Kimberl, and Bourbon Hall of Famer Peggy No Stevens. Join us each Friday at 5 p.m. New York time for our live webcasts on the WhiskeyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, and Twitch. And, of course, Whiskey's longest-running podcast series. New episodes of WhiskeyCast drop each Monday on most podcast apps and at whiskycast.com. Thanks to Dewar's and Redbreast, along with Sagamore Spirit, Oban, and Writer's Tears, our segment sponsors on the podcast each week. WhiskeyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2021, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.